Hi everyone, and welcome to week 3 of Environmental Ethics, ENV 330. This week we're going to be shifting from an analysis of the ethics of the environment, like more broadly construed, to an analysis of environmental ethics in relation to animals and proper treatment of animals. Many of you are probably think that it's acceptable to eat animals. I personally probably don't think it's acceptable to eat animals, but I do eat animals. I'm not a vegetarian. And the more that I study environmental ethics and the more that I think about animal suffering and things, the more that I think that I probably should be a vegetarian. Although it depends on what we define by animals. For example, I think that it's probably morally acceptable to eat fish and bugs. But when you tell people that they can eat bugs, they usually will kind of experience revulsion at that idea, even though in many cultures they do eat bugs. But I think there's a strong argument that can be made for the eating of bugs. I was at a philosophy conference. I think that people can eat animals and that they should, but I went to a philosophy conference where there was a pretty convincing paper that people should eat roadkill, right? So if the animal is accidentally killed, then we should eat roadkill. And the person presenting the paper broke down the number of pounds of meat that would be produced, or that are produced through roadkill accidents. And there should be crews of people whose job it is to go immediately gather the roadkill and to butcher it, clean it, and then to distribute the meat. And of course people were, again, experienced some revulsion, but if you're from, many of you are probably from a rural area. I'm from Indiana. And when people hit deer in Indiana, if they aren't hunters themselves, usually almost immediately some guys will stop with a truck, and I'm not being sexist. It could be ladies, but I've only seen men do this usually. Guy stops his truck and he's like, hey, after the cops come, do you mind if I take this deer? And if the person doesn't want the deer, then usually they say, yeah, no problem. And literally, I don't know if it's legal now, but when I was a child, people just stopped and they would take the deer. But anyway, this guy was arguing that we should eat meat. The only acceptable meat would be that killed by roadkill. In addition, there would be other types of meat that people don't usually eat. Possum, raccoon, squirrel, rabbit. For some reason in our society we've moved away from those types of meat, even though in the past people ate pretty much all types of meat. I watched a show once, a reenactment of, these reenactors were having a big party as they would in the style of the frontiersmen and women of America, and they brought a muskrat, or I think it was a muskrat, or it was some kind of water animal, not a beaver. I think it was a muskrat. They brought the carcass of a muskrat because back then people pretty much ate anything, so they were having this big party, so it was like, well, we killed a muskrat, so here's the meat, and everybody ate it. I was watching a show recently about French Canadians, and they're still eating beaver in these kind of high-end restaurants. And I've heard actually beaver tastes really good because the animals eat wood, so you get this really nice like woody taste and stuff in the meat. But most of us probably wouldn't consider eating those types of meat. So anyway, in this week we're going to think about whether or not it's acceptable to eat animals, because that's the primary cause of suffering with animals. But we're also going to think more generally about what would give an organism rights. Why do we have the right to kill something and eat it? Why do we hold animals accountable when they kill humans, but we don't hold humans accountable when they kill animals? Well, we actually do, right? You can imagine if somebody was running a dog slaughterhouse, which in some countries they do eat dog, although I think they're moving away from it. For example, like in places in Korea and stuff, people don't eat dog as much as they used to. But in our society, you can imagine if they busted into somebody's house and they had this kennel set up where they were growing dogs and slaughtering them and they kept them in tiny cages all packed together, and the dogs were killing each other and biting each other. And then they would slaughter them, and dogs were kind of writhing around in their own blood. Whoops, I didn't quite kill the dog as I wanted to. And they skin them, and then they harvest the meat, and then they're supplying restaurants with this dog meat, right? Those people would literally go to jail or face prison time, like Michael Vick, right? Just for fighting dogs, for having these events where the dogs kill each other, he went to jail. And other people go to jail for abuse of animals like dogs and cats. However, if you look at the conditions in which pigs and cows and chickens are raised for mass slaughter and consumption, usually people are horrified by those conditions, and then in the slaughter, often the animals are not killed quickly, and so they suffer, and the organisms and the bacteria that live on the animals and in their dung and feces then get into the meat sometimes, and then that's why we have, like, the E. coli outbreaks and the recalls of food that causes people to get ill. But why is it acceptable to not put a bunch of dogs in a cage and beat them and then kill them, but it is acceptable to do it with a bunch of pigs, or it is acceptable to do it with a bunch of cows? And we'll confront a lot of arguments this week that talk about those things. And many humans rationalize their eating of meat by saying that humans are kind of on this higher level of intelligence, and therefore we can eat these other animals or subdue them or control them. But then there are other arguments that make a lot of logical sense. For example, babies are not as rational as monkeys, or not even as rational as dogs. Babies can't even take care of themselves. Dogs can raise children effectively. They can raise baby dogs, and they can protect things, and they can think about what's good for themselves, at least in a very simplistic sense. They pursue food and water, and they will attack things that they care about. And so if it's acceptable to treat animals in a bad way, for example, pigs are extremely intelligent, and so why is it acceptable to slaughter and kill a pig or to keep it in very bad conditions, but it's not acceptable to do it with babies, with human babies, or with extremely mentally disabled humans who don't even come close to the rational capabilities of a monkey or of a pig or of a cow? And so these are questions that often people kind of are like, what? That doesn't make any sense. It's because humans are more important, right? Humans have an inherent value that other animals don't have, but that's precisely what these arguments are based on. How do you know that humans have a higher value? If we are just another species in the great chain of the development of all organisms, then why is it the case that other organisms don't matter as much as we do? If 99% of species have already died out and are already extinct, and we will be too someday, don't deny that fact, right? The Earth will become uninhabitable, and there could be a mass extinction event that will kill all of us. There will be some event that kills all humans, whether it's a meteor hitting the Earth or greenhouse gases causing conditions in which humans can't live, or whether it's just in a billion years when the sun is so big that it fries the Earth and there are no more oceans. And I mean, it's hard to think that humans could actually last a billion years. If you look at the history of species on Earth, no species has lasted a billion years, except perhaps for certain types of bacteria or very small organisms. So why would we think that we could make it? Oh, because of our technology. Well, our technology isn't going to help us when the surface of the Earth is over 300 degrees. So anyway, and people say, well, we'll go to another planet and we'll live there. Well, the closest, I believe, like the closest planet that's close to having the same characteristics as ours is like 1.8 light years away. And so by our current technology, it would take us something like 100,000 years to fly there. And so you'd have to have multiple generations on this spaceship. And anyway, humans will die out, and humans will be extinct from Earth. And so why is it the case that we have this view of ourselves like we're necessary or some component piece, or we have more value than other animals. Anyway, that's an overview of some of the topics that we're going to be confronting this week. You're also going to be asked to write a rough draft or an initial outline of your final paper. So be sure to pay attention to all of the details of that assignment, as well as participate in the discussions and complete the other readings for this week. I look forward to working with you, and let's have a great week.